Baltimore and when appropriate. But everyone knows my favorite segments to do are those with authors. And my favorite kind of authors are the local authors. We've had a lot of local folks around here writing books this year, but this one came to my desk, and I have extensive experience of this because I'm an old-line wrestling fan from way back, but kind of fallen out with the modern-day wrestling. This book is about old-time wrestling and the new angle of local wrestling heat. Ron Snyder's been my friend since our Baltimore Sundays, probably 2 decades ago, Ron, or has it been 2.5? I don't even remember that period of time for me, but it's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, man. Ron Snyder's our local author and friend and professor who has written a book for wrestling fans, but I think anybody might enjoy wrestling's new golden age, and I'm holding up on our YouTube and our Facebook video. What's going on, wrestling fan? What's up with you this summer?
Oh, well, I'm just anxiously waiting for this book to come out. Just got back from the family. Did the Orlando vacation.
Perfect.
And I'm just enjoying the time. This summer.
All right, well, you put the book together. Give me the whole genesis. I mean, I ask anyone who's an author. I've written a couple of books. I know that moment in the middle of the night where you're like, yeah, it's a good idea. I'll write a book. Well, I'll make $1 billion on it, right? But, that's clearly not what you were at. I mean, this is clearly a passion of yours to write a book that's so niche in this way.
Absolutely. It was kind of writing a book was a real bucket list. I've been a writer for various platforms, digital, TV, newspapers for 20 years now, and I was like, wanted to find an idea that would really captivate an audience, and I kind of came across this idea. A little bit of background. I mean, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan myself. And,
what was your first match, by the way? Because, I mean, that always my first championship match, my parents took me down to the Baltimore Civic Center in 1977, in March of 77. We saw Stan the Man Stasiak face off again against then Worldwide Wrestling Federation. I should put the other W in there. Bruno was the champ. And then the next month, the second time I ever went to the matches, Bruno lost the belt to Superstar Billy Graham. It was the last time Bruno touched the Worldwide Wrestling Federation belt.
Yeah, absolutely. My first wrestling match I went to, it's been about 30 years ago. My dad was in the wine business for a long time. One of his accounts was Sabatino's.
Perfect.
And down in Little Italy, and that's where a lot of the wrestlers hung out. And the old NWA had a event called the Crockett Cup. It brought in tag teams from all over the world, and my dad ran into the Crockett family, and we ended up getting backstage. I got to meet the Nature Boy, exactly, the Road Warriors. We got to meet a lot of the big wrestling stars of the day. And it was Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, beat the Horsemen in the finals, and it was one of those things where one of those things you never forget. And been a lifelong fan ever since then.
Well, I mean, I'm a decade before you, but I sort of bowed out right around then. Georgia Championship and the NWA used to come in here with Ric Flair and Harley Race and all that stuff, and then it really, McMahon took the entire industry in a different way, where kayfabe and the notion that it was real, kind of, and it's sports entertainment and all of that, and really pushed everybody out, including Turner, right, and TNT and all that. There's always been local promotions up in Philadelphia and in other regional areas, but here locally we've seen the MCW do well enough to be a nice little promotion that, quite frankly, a lot of it really does feed off of the older wrestlers coming in for autographs and pictures and whatnot. Right. But, there is a healthy thing happening there for wrestling. I don't know that anybody's going to get rich beyond McMahon and a few people that really get brought up to the big league, so to speak, because it is a bit of a monopoly at the higher level, right? I mean, the rest of this is more like minor league baseball kind of, sort of, right?
Well, absolutely. What happened was, when you talked about McMahon taking out Turner, anyone who was a fan of the 90s remembers, the Monday Night Wars, Raw, Nitro, and there was also ECW at the time. So then you got to remember, by 2001, ECW goes out of business. 2 months later, McMahon buys WCW, and wrestling fans went from having 3 big, huge promotions to having one place to watch wrestling. Now, on top of that, that's just one thing for the fans. Now there's only one company for the wrestlers to work, right? So a lot of people were thinking, like, well, what's going to happen now? Like, there was all this great wrestling, these great Monday Night Wars. Well, what's going to happen?
I smell antitrust. Yeah, exactly, right?
So eventually what happened, there have always been, these independent promotions. You go back even further, you can compare the different territories that had disappeared about a decade before all of that.
Well, that's what all this stuff started from. I mean, everybody had a territory that was unspoken. I mean, every time I have anybody old school on, they talk about the Gagne promotion or the Mid-South promotion out of Memphis and what the NWA was and what Gordon Soley and Georgia Championship Wrestling with Ted Turner, who loved wrestling, right? I mean, famously in the late 70s, creating his own sort of promotion that, turned into something not quite as big as CNN or TBS or the Braves, but it was a big part of the portfolio there for television on a Saturday
absolutely.
night.
I mean, in 605, watching WCW, ESPN had the AWA and World Class, and, you had the Bill Watts promotion in Oklahoma in the Mid-South area, and there was Florida Championship Wrestling, and everyone remembers Gordon Soley calling the action down there. There's the Crockett's in the Mid-Atlantic area, and, of course, you had the WWE. So, you get to this era, in the mid-'80s, McMahon and his build-up bought, or kind of beat out all those local territories. They tried different ways to kind of adjust. Most of them due to egos or just inability to evolve, failed. So,
well, there's also a lot of drugs and alcohol and hard life and, all of that behind all of that as well. And most of the smaller promotions were always underfinanced, right? I mean, they were one rainy night and, lawsuit away from being out of business, all of them, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of them were, some of them were really well ran, others, fly-by-night organizations. But you get to 2001, so what happened? Where are all these guys going to go? Now, I think it took a couple of years to kind of figure that out. You saw some promotions pop up, like a TNA, which is now went to Impact, which is now Global Force Wrestling that Jeff Jarrett built up. You have Ring of Honor, which has evolved over the last 15 years, which is based here in Baltimore now as well. And then what happens is that these independent promotions start to create, credible options for local fans. That's kind of where the genesis of this book idea came from. These, like the MCWs. Dan McDevitt has done an amazing job.
Dan's been in my home. I know, man. He brought Jim Ross here a couple years ago, and we sat down for felt like about an hour and a half and went through all the old school stuff. And I mean, there really are some legacy people that can really add some color to this, right? And how far it's come in 40 years for local promoters, especially using the internet, right? I mean, can you imagine those Monday Night Wars if Twitter were alive back in the late 90s?
Oh my gosh, it would have been even even bigger. And you're right. YouTube has created new stars, social media, and you're right. It gave an option for these established wrestlers to come out. The Hardy Boys have been here. Now they're back in WWE. You see like a Jim Ross come in for a meeting while he's doing his one-man shows. You got this weekend. You've got MCW's putting on their Shane Shamrock Memorial Cup, 14th and 15th in Joppa. They're going to have the Rock and Roll Express. They're going to have Mick Foley, The Godfather, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat there, just meeting the fans. Rock and Roll Express are going to wrestle on the card. But the bigger thing is that it's also provided a new training ground for up-and-coming wrestlers. Look at MCW, which is featured a lot in my book. They've established a school. They've got some of the top independent wrestlers coming through their system now. Leo Rush, who's one of the top independent wrestlers around. Patrick Clark was one of their first graduates. He ended up in NXT. Was one of the finalists in Tough Enough for WWE. They've had several guys that have gone through that system, and it's kind of replaced the territory era, where wrestlers back in the day, they'd go to Georgia, they'd go to Minnesota, they'd go to North Carolina, they ended up in WWE. This gives them that training ground to kind of, establish themselves. And by the time, a lot of times, local fans, they follow these guys from the time they're setting up the ring for MCW to the time they're main eventing WrestleMania. So there's that huge connection there, and there's a lot of great stories to tell on that level.
Well, and I think for the fans, the business is there, right? Like there is no more world of make believe. There's what's going on behind the scenes, back in the kitchen in the McMahon world, and drugs and violence and wrestlers and deaths and stories and all that, the real stuff. And then there's what happens in the ring. I guess from an MCW perspective or any local promotion, bringing in the Ricky Steamboats, bringing in the Rock and Roll Express, letting them wrestle, whatever. But there needs to be some heat for their own wrestlers and their own stable. I don't know what brings that heat, right? I mean, ECW back in the days of the late, great Axl Rotten, who was Brian was a friend of mine and used to come by and do radio with me back in the 90s when he was doing chainsaw matches and, baseball bats with barbed wire, like not fake stuff, like real stuff, like real blood, and real violence. And now, I think in the era of MMA, people that are bloodthirsty, they get that in the octagon now, right? I mean, and that is real. That's real violence, right? Which is different than what MCW is trying to do, or even what Vince McMahon's trying to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're seeing with MCW, and you talk about, I mentioned those stars again. The idea is that you bring some of those name people in that people recognize, and maybe the casual fan or guys from your era or my era that are on the periphery. They say, "Oh, cool! I remember him when I was growing up." Then they go there and they see a Leo Rush, they see a Brandon Scott, or they see a Ken Dixon who's there. Or Ryan McBride, at an MCW event, and they're like, "Oh, those guys are really good too." And then you see them wrestling with some of these guys that come in, like a Jack Swagger, or that were in the WWE not long ago, and they're like, "Wow, these guys can hang with the guys in WWE." And then they come back, and it's really a family environment. You go to a minor league baseball game, for example, and you see, not only do they have the game, but they got stuff going on for the kids. They get autographs, right? Same thing at an independent wrestling show. A lot of these times, there'll be autographs for the fans. The wrestlers will take pictures before and after the show with the kids. I mean, when I take my son to these events, he loves it more than WWE because he gets to go. He knows the Bruiser. He knows Dan McDevitt. He sees these guys and he roots for them. So they build that connection on a grassroots effort, that you don't often get a chance to go when you go to a WWE and there's 25,000 fans in the arena.
And your kid will never have the thrill of Dusty Rhodes that I had, or Bruno, or Bobo Brazil. But there is, this is the new thing, and it is the local thing. And
right.
And much like the Iron Birds or the Bay Sox or whatever, you can go down. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's more accessible, and it's there. He is Ron Snyder, award-winning journalist, friend of mine, more than 15 years of writing things. He has written this new book. It is called Wrestling's New Golden Age, How Independent Promotions Have Revolutionized One of America's favorite sports. You can still call it a sport, Ron, right?
Absolutely. They can call it sports entertainment, but to true fans, it's always a sport. These guys put their bodies on the line, and gals. There's a lot of women in there too, putting on a great effort as well. They put their bodies on the line, and there's a lot of training that goes involved to really putting on a good show.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, these guys are moving through the air at an incredible, making Jimmy Superfly Snuka, bringing back those memories. For you with the book, and I guess, the synopsis of the book and what you're trying to get across is that this is a beginning stage. Some of these fly-by-nights aren't fly-by-night anymore, right? They're here to stay, right?
Absolutely. I mean, these guys are putting on monthly, sometimes twice monthly shows, running sometimes multiple cities, much like the territories did back in the day. They do, big-time events. They also, utilize, much like the WWE Network, there are a lot of these promotions like WCW or MCW. Some of the other ones have streaming services. There's DVDs. It's a business. Now, I mean, no, these guys aren't necessarily getting rich off of it. It's a passion for them. But, these are legitimate organizations that are trying to put on quality wrestling and give people an option outside of the WWE. I don't think we'll ever see another Monday Night War to the level that we saw, in the 90s. I mean, several have tried. But most, Vince McMahon's on a whole other stratosphere. But wrestling fans want options. And this is what, an MCW and some of these other local promotions try to give the fans. And the stories of these guys, much like, you go to the Bowie Bay Sox and you go to the Aberdeen Ironbird games and you see, Manny Machado when he was coming up, or Matt Wieters when he was coming up, and then you get to Camden Yards, you're like, man, I watched him when he was there. I think that's what you're seeing now with wrestling fans. They go to an MCW event, and then 2 years later, they're on NXT, or they're on Ring of Honor, or they're on TNA, or they're on WWE, and they're like, wow, I knew him when, and you've got that connection that that you may not have had otherwise.
Well, that Vince is looking for, too. Vince would already like to have stars in a box, so to speak, right?
Right, and it took Vince a long time. I mean, for the longest time, the independent wrestlers, they were considered, the backyard wrestlers. They wrestled in the bingo halls and the high school gyms. But when the territories dried up, and when WCW and ECW went away, there was nowhere for wrestlers to go. So they tried to create stars. Sometimes they would bring in people that didn't have the passion for it. And what you're seeing is a lot of these guys that are coming up through the independents now, they had that passion for the business. They had that passion. They want to, they're not doing this to be Hollywood stars. They're not doing this to be musicians or models or whatever. They're doing it because they want to wrestle. And it took a Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson on the independent scene, Kevin Owens, guys like that, to come up and break the mold. And now you're seeing the top stars in WWE were all former independent guys. AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. Those guys all got their starts on the independent scene. And many of those guys wrestled in MCW at one point or another.
Ron, last thing for you. You're a Baltimore guy. I'm a Baltimore guy. My, mom and dad just take me on the 23 bus to the number 10. We go down there and grab some Geno's Fried Chicken out on Baltimore Street and see Bob Backlund, whoever was trying to get the belt that month. And then after that, obviously, the Hulk Hogan era came, into the mid-'80s. But I, spent many a night at wrestling matches. Baltimore has always been in the middle of this, right? Baltimore's always been a strong wrestling town.
Absolutely, and it was much like it was a border. It's always been it was a border town back in the day. WWE would run here, NWA would run here, Georgia Championship Wrestling would run here. This was always a huge wrestling town. Some of the biggest moments in wrestling history, have happened here in Baltimore. You mentioned Bruno Sammartino losing the title to Superstar Billy Graham. I mentioned the Crockett Cup, Sting winning his first title from Ric Flair in 1990, or Owen, the late great Owen Hart winning the King of the Ring here in '94, which I was there with my dad in the stands watching. As Art Donovan was on the call with Randy Savage and Gorilla Monsoon. So it's some great moments have happened here in wrestling history, and I think these are really passionate wrestling fans, and they expect quality wrestling. Well,
listen, this is the last. I'm going to leave you with this. By the way, it is Ron Snyder. You can follow him at Ron Snyder Media on Twitter. Wrestling's New Golden Age, How Independent Promotions Have Revolutionized One of America's Favorite Sports. You can check the book out and check it out on Facebook and Twitter as well. Yep. Last thing for you, when you see Kevin Eck next time, remind him of the greatest wrestling experience in the history of Baltimore. That was the Blood Circus with Ox Baker, okay?
I will remind
him of Blood Circus and Ox Baker. I'm sure he'll give you a story worthy of for your book on that one.
I appreciate it. The book officially comes out August 8th, but you can purchase it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pre-order. It's 240 pages of blood, sweat, and tears. It was a 16-month process, and I'm really hoping that everyone will check it out.
I'm hoping everybody checks it out, too. Ron, you're a good man. Good luck with the book, and we'll continue to stay in touch, and maybe I'll see you somewhere near the squared circle before it's all over with. All right?
I hope so. Thank you so much, Nestor. I appreciate it, and good luck to you as well.
Always. Ron Snyder, one of the good dudes here in local media. You can follow him at Ron Snyder Media. The book is Wrestling's New Golden Age, and it is available in just a few weeks, out in early August. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. You can get some inspiration out at PlanetOfTriumphs.com as well. Any breaking news this summer on the Ravens, the Orioles, or the like, you get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here this Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready for training camp and all things purple this summer. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube channel. And I am Mike, Mr. Angelos, a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. And if you're interested in Mr. Angelos, the Peter Principles are available in reading format, audio format. We'll have it in a full format here in about 2 weeks as well. For those of you looking for chapters 6, 7, and 8, they are coming soon, but they are online right now if you wish to read them. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and we even talk wrestling around here, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.